This is an introduction to accessibility. I will be guiding you through some disability statistics and facts, why accessibility is important, assistive technology, and also how we can create accessible products. So first, what is accessibility? Accessibility recognizes that people interact with technology in diverse ways and removes barriers so that people with disabilities can more fully engage with digital content, tools, products, and services. So some statistics about disabilities. People with disabilities are the world's largest minority. In the United States, 61 million adults live with a disability, so that's a little over a quarter of the adults in the United States. Worldwide, there's over 1 billion people that live with a disability, and it's very likely that you, at some point in your life, might experience some form of disability, whether it's temporary or permanent. There are different types of disabilities. There's physical, so someone who has a missing limb, has arthritis, has paralysis or repetitive stress injury. Visual disabilities, so someone who maybe doesn't see color accurately, has low vision or is blind. Auditory, so someone who doesn't hear well or is deaf. Speech, someone who's mute, who's not able to speak well or stutters. There's cognitive, learning, and neurological disabilities, so people with ADHD, autism, mental health disabilities, including some medications that might also have side effects, memory impairments, learning disabilities, and seizure disorders. So disabilities might be permanent, temporary, or situational. So temporary might be something like a short-term injury, like maybe a broken arm where you can only use one arm, or maybe you have an ear infection so you can't hear well, or you have laryngitis so you can't speak well or be heard well. Or it might be situational. It might be the environment that you're in. You might be in a loud environment so you don't hear very well, or you might have some sort of distraction. So why is accessibility important? One of the reasons is that accessibility is part of being inclusive. So the web does offer a lot of valuable resources and services that everyone deserves to access and that people with disabilities rely on. So I'm going to play a video of people with disabilities sharing why accessibility matters in technology.
Passions. Everyone should have a passion.
I love fashion. I like to dress nice.
I love food. I love drawing.
What I'm passionate about is that everything should work for everybody.
I'm currently working as a mathematics teacher in a school for the blind.
I was a social worker years ago, and because of my hearing loss, I could not do my job anymore, and I left my job.
I have cerebral palsy, and I use assistive touch, and I am access all the features.
The advancement of technology has really been helpful to me. Now I use my phone for going online almost exclusively.
If there wasn't accessibility, I wouldn't be here. I'm using my phone to read what you're saying. I have an app.
In my hand, I can hold a device that keeps me connected to the world. And the only question is, how do I access it? Everyone else is looking at their smart devices, and I have to listen to it.
Wait 5,000 minimum. I need a consistent environment. I don't need something that's cute. I'm not here for cute. I'm here for efficiency. The machine is making things easier for me. If it makes things harder, it goes in the bay.
There should be something for someone like me where I could have an insight of what's trending and get to know what goes with my body type, what goes with my skin color.
Each of us have our own needs. We're all on a spectrum. And on that spectrum, all we need are the right tools to be able to gain access to what we need.
All of this technology has been absolutely life-changing for me and for people with hearing loss.
Accessibility, to me, is like the air. It has to be there all the time.
So a quote from Tim Berners-Lee, W3C director and inventor of the World Wide Web. The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. So another reason why it's important is that it improves the user experience. So while it is essential for some people, it's useful for everybody. So anyone can experience periods of limitation or prefer different ways of finding and consuming information. So think about your device might have glare on it. Having a high contrast design might help you see it clearer. Also, voice recognition would keep your hands free, and using captions would help you in a loud environment. Another reason why accessibility is important is that it drives innovation. So a lot of times when we're presented with limitations in solving a problem, it helps us think through solutions differently and maybe come up with something unique. So in this next video, it's about how Microsoft's leadership bought into a culture shift around accessibility.
But accessibility is that lens into innovation, right? When we think about a design constraint, use the computer with your eyes only. Use the computer with your voice only. Use the computer with your keyboard only, right? Those are often accessibility questions that we're asking ourselves, but that leads to natural user interface design. And when we invest in accessibility, and Satya has said this, we are investing in the future of the way that we all want to be able to compute, right? So that's kind of that culture question in which how are we setting up our company to be leaders in accessibility, but honestly, just to be leaders in the technology that we all need and want to use every single day.
So another reason why accessibility is important is that it helps minimize legal risk. So many countries do have laws that require digital accessibility, and lawsuits have been increasing. In the United States, there are two main laws that govern digital accessibility. There's the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, and Section 508. So the ADA is a law that protects people with disabilities in a lot of different areas of public life. There's Title II, and this applies to web accessibility for state and local governments. And then there's Title III. This applies to businesses that are open to the public. With Section 508, it establishes accessibility requirements for electronic and information technology developed, maintained, funded, or used by the federal government. So another reason why it's important is that clients may require it. And in the case of anything that's related to a federal agency or sponsored by them, you do have to complete something called a Voluntary Product Accessibility Template, or VPAT. And it's basically, it checks your level of conformance with WCAG standards. Another reason that it's important is that it is an added value for our clients. Some of our clients may not realize how important accessibility is or the value of it, but it gives us an opportunity to establish the value that we contribute to the success of their product, and it might also give us a marketing edge against competing agencies. Another thing to keep in mind is that even though it does take more time and effort up front to make a product accessible, if you have to go back and rework the product, it's most likely going to cost even more. From the Gartner report, by 2025, all G20 countries, which account for 90% of the global world product, will establish enforceable legal standards for digital accessibility, leading to a GDPR moment in which businesses scramble to achieve compliance. Another reason why it's important is that it can affect your reputation and competition. So diversity and inclusion efforts are important to business success and reputation, and many people prefer to support companies who share the same values that they do. And people prefer to use products that fit their needs and that they're able to use. So in this next video, it's about how Visa is walking the walk, basically, when it comes to accessibility.
Well, financial inclusion is extremely important to Visa, and accessibility is a huge part of that. The industry is still in its infancy, but we've been doing it for over a decade.
Accessibility and user experience are the same thing. If we're going to do usability for all our users, we need to make sure we're including them all. We're testing accessible products with users with disabilities so that Visa can really walk the walk.
Basically, I just don't bank online at all because I feel like the websites are so challenging. Desktop sites are so challenging to use. A lot of them have drop-down menus that scroll off to the side with more menus and more menus, and a lot of times because I'm zoomed in with screen magnification software, my pointer on my mouse will get off of those choices, and then I have to go all the way back to the left.
It's upsetting because I don't want to continue my task. Yeah, I'm just like, forget it. If it's not that important, it's like, forget it. I'll just find it out later.
Well, it's really simple. The more convenient doing business online is for people with disabilities, the more independent we can be.
We have the opportunity now to remove the barriers that people face when using technology so that everyone can participate and contribute. Visa is the worldwide leader in payments. We go to work every day to ensure that no one's left behind.
From the Gartner report, by 2023, digital products in full WCAG Level 2 compliance will outperform their market competitors by 50%. Another reason that is important is that it positively affects SEO. So there's a lot of overlap between features that improve accessibility and SEO performance. So these are things like metadata, image alt text, link anchor text, heading tag structure, and audio and video transcriptions. Now I'm going to speak about assistive technology. Assistive technology is software and hardware that people with disabilities use to improve how they interact with the web. These might be things like alternative keyboards, alternative mouse, head wand, mouth stick, refreshable braille display, screen magnifier, screen reader, and voice recognition software. In this next video, a person that's disabled is using assistive technology to be able to access his mobile device.
I am not able to see what's on the screen. I'm holding it in front of my face right here like I can see it, but I can't. When I unlock the screen here and turn on my speech, I can touch the screen, and instead of activating something that I touch with my finger, it will read it to me and tell me what it is. And if I want to activate it, I touch the screen twice quickly to activate it. And that means that I need to explore the screen with my finger, or there's another command I can use called the swipe right and the swipe left. And that's it. Very similar to using the tab or shift tab keys on a desktop.
Phone number.
MM. Okay, that's probably a month. That's probably a day. Yai, which it usually means multiple Ys. I'm gonna see if I can figure out how many Ys.
Misspelled words. Edit. Braille table. Deep form controls. Link. Headings. Containers. Language.
I'm using the rotor to go to characters. Okay, 4 Ys. There's only so much you can control about how the screen reader pronounces Y, but you can certainly label these fields. I'm experiencing, as an assistive technology user, your website differently than a visual person would, but they're part of the same code base. It's the same website. When you invest in accessibility, you're gonna find a lot of things with your website that you didn't even know were issues for everybody.
So another technique is through adaptive strategies. And these are techniques that already use things that you have in your operating system, in your browser. So things like being able to control the size of the text, speed of the mouse, turning on captions, minimizing motion, or using voiceover. I also wanted to touch on these add-ons that you might have experienced or seen advertised. So these are overlays, plugins, toolbar widgets that are slated as being affordable, and they automate accessibility fixes. Well, there's a lot of issues with these. One of them is that it overrides assistive technology settings and it forces users to learn a whole new system. They don't repair underlying issues. Basically, they're a band-aid, so they don't achieve full compliance. Also, loading speed and performance are something you won't be able to control, and it might conflict with your user's preference for data privacy and protection. So these are a few quotes from people with disabilities, their experience with some of these add-ons. The first one is, I know with 100% certainty, any site which has deployed an overlay in the past year and a half has been less usable for both my wife and me, both blind. Accessibility, which is a product, makes sites harder to use by getting in the way of browsing and changing access barriers on the page, not fixing them. And there are 0 automated tools that can detect accessibility problems accurately at anything above 30% of the time. So how do we create products that are accessible? There are international standards. They are developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C. They also develop international standards for the web, HTML, CSS, and many others. They have a Web Accessibility Initiative, WAI, and they develop technical specifications, guidelines, techniques, and supporting resources for accessibility solutions. Web Accessibility Content Guidelines, pronounced WCAG or WCAG, are considered the international standards for web accessibility. This is also what Section 508 accepts as their standard. And a brief history about WCAG. Version 1.0 was released in May of 1999. In 2008, 2.0. 2018 was 2.1, and 2.2, there will be some additions slated for spring. So WCAG is based on 4 principles and 13 guidelines, and the principles spell out POUR, P-O-U-R. Perceivable is one of the principles. Users must be able to perceive the information being presented. So this would be things like text alternatives, audio and video alternatives, content that is adaptable, and being able to see and hear content. Operable is a principle, so users must be able to operate the interface. So making sure that it's keyboard accessible, providing enough time, mitigating seizures, making sure it's navigable, and having input modalities. Understandable is a principle, so users must be able to understand the information as well as the operation of the user interface. So the guidelines are around being readable, predictable, and having input assistance. And then the last principle is robust. So users must be able to access the content as technologies advance. They have 78 success criteria, and they're categorized into 3 levels of conformance. So there's A, which is must have, AA, which is should have, and then AAA, which is good to have. The industry standard is WCAG 2.1 AA. That means you're also conforming to A. So I'm going to briefly introduce some of the things that we're working on. One of them is a checklist for testing. This is a master checklist taking from the international standards. Anything that's A and AA is listed here. And it's basically a checklist depending on your discipline and whether it passes or fails. There's abbreviated versions for designers, people that are writing copy, and also developers. Another thing we have is a Miro board that basically has discover and planning. So basically our roadmap for implementing accessibility. There's also a section on training designers. And so basically taking all of these principles and success criteria and creating categories and breaking them down into things that have examples and more supporting information to help understand them. So the creative team is trained on this. Developers are updating a section in their handbook, which is basically a GitHub repository. It includes tips with code snippets. And there's also a Trello board that we've created with resources related to accessibility. So who's responsible for creating accessible products? It's a shared responsibility. So everything from how the product or project is sold to how we do our user research. So making sure that people with disabilities are included, making sure we're considering people with disabilities during the user experience, also the way that we design it, that we write the copy, how it's developed, and also finally testing everything. So kind of what we're working on is role-specific training. Some of it is in progress, some of it has been completed. We're also defining internal processes and making sure that we have documentation. Thank you.